Good afternoon. I'm Vishal. Give me a second here. I'll get set up. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Quick show of hands before I get started. How many of you are actively building products, engineering guys, like actually like doing this stuff? Excellent. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, I don't know about 100x. I'll talk about it from the perspective of what's worked for us. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to speak about as well is based on work that we've done in the very recent few months, because things are moving so quickly. So rather than say that I know all the answers or anything of that sort, I'm going to tell you very clearly that this is 100% work in progress. That's why it says current AI workflow, because it's probably going to change tomorrow. And I think that you're all experiencing that right now. It's an incredible time to be doing what we do. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on what my product that we're building, what it does. We're a team of about 14 people now, so there's a few engineers. And it's a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about are related to working with teams and agents at a slightly larger number of people, where communication becomes challenging. What we're doing is we're building AI for technology risk. Technology risk is security, privacy, resilience, and third-party risk. That's how we define it. These are all the things that slow large enterprises down when they're trying to ship code fast. Our thesis is that AI is going to make this very, very difficult to do at scale, because you can ship code really, really quickly. Without these guardrails, without these capabilities to process what's happening, also being agents, it's going to be impossible to basically make that happen at scale for large enterprises. So Stance does all of these things, tracks regs, maps your organization, policies, procedures, controls, alarms, evidence, and does your audit as well. And the result should be zero friction compliance before you ship something. And that basically comes out in these few core capabilities that we've built. So we have what we call a framework copilot, which basically allows you to build policy frameworks and control frameworks inside of your organization to meet the obligatory demands that you've got from regulators. We build evidence agents to collect evidence that you're doing the right thing at scale. And that helps you to prove that the code that you're shipping is actually viable to use in an enterprise production context. You're able to audit that through chat, so effectively have a conversation with what's happening right now inside of your environment. And then, of course, all the big guys at the top want to see real-time risk reporting. That's a question of lots of dashboards, lots of visualizations, lots of interesting ways of presenting complex, deep, and highly detailed data in a way that an executive can consume. That last part will be important from the perspective of the design workflow that I'm going to talk about later. A large portion of the problem is how do we present back to the user? I think it's become fairly obvious that chat has become the best way to communicate, but if that's the input, right? That's you're telling the agents what you want them to do. But taking that data back and putting it in a form that a human can assimilate quickly, that's still, I believe, a user experience problem and a UI problem that has to be solved. And I think that we're going to see a massive number of new forms of user interface in the near term. It's going to be really exciting from a user experience design perspective. Okay, so this is my disclaimer. Your mileage may vary. These are patterns that are working for our team. As I said, we're about 14 people. Of that, about 10 of us are actively engineering in the product. The rest are either forward deployed specialists or they are sales folks that are using AI but not to actually build product. They may not work for what you're doing, all right? So pick and choose what you think might be useful. We use Claude Code extensively. I have not really spent much time playing with Codex. I don't really know how the Windsurf guys who are now incorporated into Gemini, how that works. But I think it's called anti-gravity, right? I haven't used those systems. Our choice was Claude Code. I think that's been the choice for most folks. Actually, how many of you are using anything other than Claude Code? Wow. Okay, so we should probably talk later. Tell me if there's something cool out there. And then this is most likely going to be out of date because of something that Anthropic shipped last night that I haven't seen yet. But as you'll see, actually, that's happened already for one of the things that I'm going to show you. But yeah, it's needless to say, things are moving very, very quickly. So I wanted to make this point because I heard a horror story from one of my one of my founder friends rather, in a different business. They, they had their keys in their environment, and Claude Code, it's not supposed to be able to access the keys directly, but it managed to do some crazy stuff and got access to those keys. I'm a big proponent of 1Password. I've been using it for, gosh, probably like 8 or 10 years. It's a really great way of managing your passwords in one place, but they've got this thing which is the CLI, and it allows you to effectively encrypt all your passwords. How many of you would be willing to come up on stage and show me your ENV file with the projector? Yeah, that's a problem, all right? So don't keep your keys in plain text. As you can see, this is actually our ENV file, and all it's got is links to 1Password. So 1Password has all the passwords inside of it. It's processed in real time when the CLI needs it. It uses your fingerprint to unlock, and then only then shares that. So it's kind of restricted. The blast radius is very small, and because it's not in text, it can't be grepped, it can't be found, it can't be committed. All of that stuff goes away. So we can share an ENV file amongst all of our teammates with no challenges at all. It helps a lot for setting up new laptops and things like that to get access to your dev environment. This has been really, really powerful for us. I believe that they have like a free tier, but you're probably going to need to spend some money on this eventually. Hopefully Grayscale will give you some, and you can take care of that. Okay, so the single biggest unlock that we had is this skill that we call RTFM, which is basically a way of giving context to Claude. I know that sounds super trivial. Every single time you open it, you have to prompt it, so you're giving it context every single time. But documenting this across our entire team started to become a challenge. And this sort of became the distillation of how we solved that problem. So we use Notion internally. I think they do have a fairly generous free tier. Notion has a really great export to Markdown, which obviously is the best way to store your actual context, but keeping it in sync and making sure that everybody has the same stuff across your entire team was becoming a challenge for us. We already use Notion to actually manage specs and the documentation that we were doing inside the product, rather than trying to fight that and force people to use the file system for that. We figured, why not build a sink that allowed us to take things that were written in Notion and bring them into our Git repository. So we actually have a thing we call nsync, which effectively synchronizes Notion every single time that we build the project. That makes sure that all the documentation that's inside there before we start coding is always the same. It pulls from a single source. You're able to write into Notion using the MCP server. It works really, really well. And then what we've done is we've kind of made it mandatory to write out in the model, firstly, what you're planning on building. This is probably the most important step. If you can just document exactly what it is that has to be built, the agent has that context. Even when it runs out of memory, you can kind of prompt it to go RTFM again, and it comes back to the top. It's helpful for agents when they're starting up sub-agents, because they can also pick up from the same place. Your entire team has access to the same specs and the same model, which means that there's consistency across your entire team. And of course, autonomous agents would also have access to the same information. So basically, a single source of truth is one of the biggest unlocks that we found. It's probably something that all of y'all are doing at some level. You don't have to use Notion. Some founder friends of mine in different businesses have been using beads from Steve Yegi very, very effectively as well. We use Notion and nsync to get this done. It works really well for us. I recommend that you have a style guide, because you want to make sure that each and every one of the specs that you put in there are actually built with the same key things, and that structure makes a difference because it makes sure you don't miss anything. And then we just built a skill to read the manual. And that was very simple, but once you had that, it stopped conflicts, it stopped duplication. In many different places, we found ourselves reinventing the wheel rather than using an existing function. And it also stops code clobbering from concurrent commits that are happening on the same code base. Consistent with this and kind of attached to this is the build loop. So we use a product called Linear. Show of hands, how many of you use Linear? Okay, a few of you. It's got a very generous free tier. Linear also has a really great MCP server. And it's used for basically for product teams to effectively build out what they're going to build next. You know how Claude Code has a plan mode, and I believe that also Codex has a plan mode? We've basically said we wanted to put that plan mode into linear, because what it's doing when it's building a plan mode is it's building tickets of what it has to do. And then it's actually going and executing those tickets. But if you've got a very large list of things that have to be done, typically by the end of it, it's lost too much context and it dies. So when we've got very large specs, it becomes important to break that down into smaller tasks. So we use linear to basically hold individual large chunks of work. And then because, again, linear is accessible by everybody else in the team, anyone can pick up a ticket and start building it, even if somebody else has planned it out. It also, because linear keeps track of dependencies, it allows you to know when you can execute sub-agents in parallel to do a job. So effectively, if you end up in a situation where 3 or 4 tickets are now unblocked because a previous ticket is complete, you can now run all 4 of those simultaneously in sub-agents. I mean, it'll chew through your tokens, but you will get the job done faster, which is, I think, the whole point over here. So we've got this loop that we do, which is spec, plan, test, code, and document. We're not really very good yet at, I think, building out a sufficient number of tests or prompting the AI to build those tests properly. I think it oftentimes takes shortcuts and wants to jump into code. Claude Code in particular feels like it always wants to be coding. It doesn't want to do the work. And a lot like an engineer, actually. But we found that by kind of constantly bringing it back and saying, hey, follow this, these are the instructions, you end up with testable code at the end, and a lot of rework goes away, and you end up being able to one-shot many, many more things. So it's worth it. We also do UI testing with the Chrome MCP. That's been fantastic as well. And it works really well with Vercel's agent browser as well. There's some new stuff that's coming with WebMCP and things that are probably very exciting, but I haven't seen implementations of that do the job the way that this does yet. But we're definitely looking at this space. It also makes sure that you can lock tasks, because if a particular task is in session from some agent somewhere or some other person in your team, the person that's going to pick up the next ticket doesn't pick it up because it's kind of blocked on the back of that. So it stops rework. All right, so now I'm kind of moving into the design space. So we've got this design toolbox that we use. It's a combination of agentation, which, how many of you have heard of this before? 1, 2, okay. I think this is a really, really powerful tool, especially if you're doing anything that has a front end. And I would hope that all of you have some front end to deal with your users and your human kind of counterparts, yeah? It is fantastic at being able to annotate specific things that you want to change in the UI and kind of copy paste that into Claude Code very, very quickly. So it saves a ton of time in terms of trying to find that right element. I want you to make the logo bigger, becomes very specifically, in fact, I can show you how that works. So this is agentation down here. It's a little annotation thing. And as you can see, it's starting to highlight all of the various components. If I say on this, make the logo bigger. If you just gave this to Claude Code, it probably wouldn't do as good a job. Once you can tag multiple things, but I'm just tagging one thing for the courses of the demo. Copy it, come over here, and literally just paste it in a Claude Code window, and it's off and running. And it'll go do that in the background. So I'll just leave that alone for a bit. I think that Figma is still relevant. A lot of people have kind of said, we can go straight into the HTML phase. Why do we care about building a mock-up? I don't think you need to build high fidelity, full design system mock-ups anymore. I think that's dead. But definitely the value of being able to see things on a screen collaboratively and being able to kind of translate that from there using the MCP server has been very effective for us. So it's made the logo bigger, I believe. Yeah, bumped it up to 64 pixels. So it knew exactly what to do. I didn't have to do anything about it. So Figma is still relevant. I think that it does help you from the perspective of building new UI paradigms. If you've already got things built in ShadCN and you've got all of your Tailwind stuff taken care of, you don't really need to use Figma anymore. You can just ideally use the design system that you've built. So the stuff that you can see on the right-hand side, we've built out a design system page that is accessible by Claude Code, obviously, before it starts building things. Plus, we're using the shared CN, MCP, and componentry. And now I think they've just launched their CLI as well, which we're incorporating into it. It's very, very powerful if you've got it all documented and you know exactly what has to be done. But the first time that we wanted to build these special tags over here, we've got like these linear tags, and we've got these tags that are kind of like trees that can be compressed and opened. Those don't exist as standard UI elements. So we had to create the UI elements. To design the UI elements, you can't do that if you don't know what you want. There's no existing shared CN plugin I can bring in. So if you're in that kind of space, you'll still need Figma. And like I said, I think that a lot of the work and a lot of the innovation that's going to happen on the user side is going to happen in the presentation layer. So I think that there should be a lot of work that happens in Figma. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a tool that I coded myself to solve a problem that I've got. Have any of y'all heard of Danger Mouse? Yeah, see, the young room. Danger Mouse is an old UK cartoon, and this is like his sidekick, which I thought was a cool idea, but apparently nobody else knows who he is. Anyway, so this is a native iOS app. It's built, obviously, in Swift. It's got a daemon in Go that runs alongside it. It uses Tailscale to connect to any devices that you have inside of your Tailscale network. It uses tmux, and it uses Claude Code. Now, I obviously built this before remote control came out from Claude Code. So this was how I needed to solve the problem. This was for my particular workflow. One of the things that you can do is you can kind of build throwaway code. And you can just like build the tools that you need to do your job better. My problem was I was running all of these Claude Code sessions. I do about 8 now simultaneously. Past that, like I feel like I lose context, so it's not possible to do it anymore. But I have multiple accounts. So I've got one which is like my personal Claude Code on a max plan, and then I've got another one which is obviously from the company. And I want to be able to use both whenever I feel like it. The problem with remote control is still that it's linked to just one account. So I still have to use this, but I'm hoping that those kind of features will come to remote control eventually. So I need multiple sessions, I need multiple accounts, I want to use multiple devices, and I need to do that remotely because I'm not always at my desk. I'm the CEO after all, so I do need to actually go meet customers. But this helps me to do that. So I'm going to try and do a live demo of this. Hopefully it'll be able to connect to my phone, and hopefully there's nothing incriminating on my phone right now. Oh boy. Demo gods. Hang on. All right, cool. All right, so it's connected. I have 2 separate Claude Code sessions open over here. One is with my non-functional, which is the name of the company, stance system over here, which is where I submitted that logo change. And this one is a local session that I created to kind of like I just gave it a prompt earlier to say, I want to change the color scheme on Penfold on the basis of the mood of the person that's using it. So it's created a plan over here, and all of the details are obviously, they're inside here, and it's waiting for me to accept the plan. You can see over here, it's also waiting to accept the plan. This is on my phone. I can do this from anywhere in the world because it doesn't matter with Tailscale. Because it's set up in a fashion that it's a native iOS application, I can effectively see prompts and things. If it has questions to ask or whatever, it shows me that over here. It can pull up the entirety of the plan. And you can see it used markdown rendering. So effectively anything that's inside of this over here will show up over there. And then of course I can either work on my laptop or work on my phone, and it works great for me. But this tool is effectively now obsolete, right? And that was one of the other big learnings that I had over the course of this entire thing, which is don't get sentimental about the stuff you build because code is really, really cheap. In fact, you should probably not think about code the same way. It's not a finite resource anymore. I've also found that if you spend we've met a lot of teams that spend a lot of time polishing their tools. Don't do that. Get it to work, make it stable enough so it's not actively slowing you down, and stop. You don't have to worry about turning that into an open source project or whatever. It's probably going to get, taken out by one of the big boys almost instantaneously. All the harnesses feel like they're going that way. It will get eaten eventually. So interestingly, we use Vue on the front end, not React. But agentation and ShadCN both are primarily built for React. ShadCN has a Vue component that is built, but it's kind of a few versions behind the latest. It didn't fit what we were doing, but I wanted to use it because it was cool. So I just vibe coded or slop coded, slop forked it, I guess, is what they call it now, and basically created a copy of that. That allowed us to use the tool that I wanted to inside of our product, even though it wasn't made for my product. The ability to do that is crazy, right? The fact that you can do that and just throw it away later, not have to worry about it merging into main and like becoming a part of the core project, waiting for the person that's running that project to implement it, like all of those problems go away now. So if you can't find a tool that fits you, fork the ones that do. Or fork the ones that you want to use and convert them to make them work with your project. We try to use a lot of different platforms and like databases and things to store stuff. You can get very, very far with just file systems and text files. And you get like, grep, awk, sed, elseof, and like most importantly, I think Git comes for free. So that version control across a team is still incredibly powerful, even for things like documentation and databases. And then the last one I'd say is that you've got to basically separate deterministic and non-deterministic tasks in your workflow. That's been a big unlock for us across the board. But yeah, that's sort of the main things that I wanted to cover. I know I covered a lot, but I just wanted to kind of say this and then maybe open it up for questions. We are hiring one product engineer. So if anybody over here thinks that this stuff is cool and wants to work with us, let me know. I think the only thing that's important now is taste. So if you've got good taste in software, in code, in design, then I want to talk to you. But that's it. That's all I got. Are we doing Q&A? What's the deal? I'm sorry, I can't see. Any questions? Yep.
So, you said you have separated the deterministic and non-deterministic tasks.
Yeah.
How do you actually do it? Like, how did you actually get there? Like, is there a framework that you, or a mental model?
Yeah, so it's mostly about stuff like where the outcome is known before you start. So like for instance, if I need to be able to pull a certain number of documents from a database, and I'm using an agent to do that, ideally that should be delegated down to some tool that will do that deterministically, even if the agent's the one that's calling it. And also it's helpful to have those kinds of abstractions built into your code such that the first port of call is the MCP or is the skill where you're going to actually consume the MCP, or it might be that you're calling a service through an API to get that done, or a CLI that you've built specifically for the purpose. But effectively drop it down into deterministic code for that particular task. And what you'll find is as you identify those tasks and you add to the tool set, that forever becomes deterministic. Because the first thing that you're telling it to do is, if there's a tool that exists to do this job, do that first, before trying to figure it out yourself, right? So that it's a process of elimination more than anything else. You find a deterministic thing, create a way of doing that deterministically or programmatically.
And you probably add it to a skill, right? How does it work?
Sorry?
And you probably add it to skill kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you basically, if you wanted to execute something, you have to give it context of being able to execute it, right? So we usually have an index of commands that it has access to. We find MCPs clutter the context a little bit too much. So we use that for things that we know every single session needs to call or every single agent times needs to call. But for things that are dependent upon the specific branch of or topic that you're trying to address, we tend to do that through CLI commands. That has like kind of just, there's one page in our documentation that says this is the CLI commands you have access to. That's part of the context. Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
My name is Pranov Pathak. I'm the founder of a SaaS marketplace platform like My SaaS. My question is that, as teams are trying to adopt new stacks and solutions, and most of them are trying to work with lean teams, how
right? To try out new tooling, right? Yeah, so, I mean, again, I don't know if this is universally applicable. This is just what worked for us. We've given everybody a lot of autonomy, right? So that's why it was okay for me to build Penfold, because that solves my problem, right? I'm not forcing anybody to have a tool chain that works for the entire team. Obviously, the components that we are mandating are things like shared documentation, shared task management, because those are the things that you actually need to collaborate on. But your specific workflow, like what you do to get the outcome, I really don't care. Every Friday we have like a brown bag session where we basically sit together and we talk about all the cool shit that we're doing. But honestly, that's not the goal. The goal is to get ideas and potentially adopt something that has become useful to some one individual. And of course, one of the requirements is that if somebody wants to work with your stuff, you have to share. But that's it. Like, those are the rules. And it's easy.
But you come to that stage when you have a stack that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
You come to that, but when you are actually, in the process of still evaluating stacks, then what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that from the shared components that I spoke about, right? Those shared components were already chosen for us. And honestly, this is not yeah, A, it's not rocket science, and B, I feel like everyone's kind of settled on the same set of tools, right? Yeah, generally considered, like, Notion, there are some people who are still using, other things, but largely Notion kind of won that space. And then Linear, I think anyone that uses it certainly feels like it is better than, the Jiras of the world, right? So these are, I'm not saying that they are the incumbent forever. Something new might come up tomorrow that does amazing things with agents, and I'll happily be singing that tune tomorrow. But it has to elevate past the noise to get to you.
And then the point is to get to the North Star that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, look, ultimately all you care about is outcome, right? Does it solve the purpose? Does it actually get you more customers? That's it.
Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Sam? Sorry, last question.
Gemini is on CNN, and the ChatGPT is a token-based model.
Yeah.
So token-based is our human language. That is converted into some token, that kind of structure that we have built. And the CNN is like picture we are seeing.
Yeah.
So these are two different way of running the AI and learning. And now, why LSTM ChatGPT is better? Because it is able to run on best GPU, best TPU. But Gemini is not right now.
Right.
It requires higher end GPU, higher end TPU, quantum computer. LSTM, this token based. What do you think? So, are you waiting for another? Google can build a best LSTM, or we can get the CNN now the best possible? Like, it can see the picture and it can do everything as LSTM is doing.
I find that there's sort of these cycles that come and go, right? The best will typically end up being the one that achieves the outcomes that you're looking for. So you have to experiment and try it all, and don't price your tools too dearly. Like,
So what I am asking is, so right now we are understanding the world through our brain.
yeah,
Perceiving. So ChatGPT works like that, the brain. So it is not perceiving a lot of things, a small thing that is required for our consciousness. So learning is also not infinite, it is limited. And now it can cover entire thing of the existence with the LSTM. So if it can, and if it that's it only, then have you achieved the AGI?
no. No, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think we're anywhere near that. Sure. All right, that's all the time I have. Folks, if you need to talk to me, catch me later. I'm around all day. Thank you.